They buried her at midnight, under a moon that refused to rise. The earth around the convent was soft, blackened from decades of silence and unspoken sins. No one spoke her name. Not the sisters who carried her coffin. Not the priest who refused to bless the ground. And certainly not the bishop, who insisted there had never been a Sister Magdalene in the first place. But she was real, and she is still listening. The convent had rules ancient, sacred, and absolute. No mirrors. No singing after sundown. And above all, never open the door in the east hallway. It was sealed with wax and prayer, locked from both sides. But Magdalene was curious. Curious enough to see what the church tried to forget. Curious enough to hear the knocking on the other side. It never begged. It invited. And one night, she said yes. They say she screamed, just once before. The silence poured in and took her voice. Her room was found drenched in salt water, though the nearest sea was 700 miles away. Her Bible melted, her eyes turned inward, and she whispered, "I saw her face," until the blood dried on her lips. They buried her without rites, without hymns, without mercy. But the door is open again. Welcome to Convent Nightmares, where devotion becomes damnation. If you're brave or foolish enough to hear what the church has tried to erase, subscribe now, light your candle, and comment below. Your city and country. Some prayers were never meant to be answered. This is one of them. Sister Evangeline was the first to hear the door open. It was subtle at first, a whisper behind the stone, like fabric rushing across ancient wood. But she knew the sound. Every nun did. The east hallway had remained untouched for decades barred, sealed and spoken of only in fearful glances and half-finished prayers. Yet that night, as the storm clawed at the convent windows and the candles refused to stay lit, she felt the pull. Not from the door, from what lay behind it. She rose from her cot, robe clinging to her ankles with sweat. Her crucifix hung heavy around her neck, colder than metal should ever be. The others slept in uneasy silence, their breaths shallow, their dreams restless. Evangeline didn't need to see the signs. She felt them in her marrow. This wasn't the wind. This wasn't imagination. It was Magdalene, calling. The hallway to the east wing had once held the infirmary, before it was condemned, after the fire, after the disappearances, after the night they all agreed never happened. But the scorch marks still lived beneath the repainted walls, and the doorknob was always warm to the touch. Tonight it was freezing, as if whatever waited beyond had pulled in all the warmth, all the light, all the mercy. She reached the door just as the chapel bells. When Sister Evangeline awoke, she was on the floor of the chapel, face pressed against the cold stone, robes damp with dew. Morning had broken, or what passed for morning now. The light through the stained glass windows was dull, gray, and reluctant. A silence filled the room that was far too still to be natural, like sound itself had been warned away. She rose slowly, trying to piece together what had happened. The east hallway? The mirror? Magdalene. Her hand reached for her crucifix, and found only a threadbare cord. The pendant was gone. The air around her felt thinner, like it had been strained through a sieve of prayers. She wasn't alone. She could feel it, just past her peripheral vision. Something watching, waiting, learning the rhythm of her breath. The others were already gathered. Sister Helena, Sister Ruth, Sister Maria, they all stood in a loose circle around the altar, eyes blank, lips moving but making no sound. As Evangeline approached, she realized they were mouthing something in unison, over and over. One word, a name, Magdalene, not with fear, with reverence. "Where were you?" Sister Helena asked, though her voice did not sound like her own. It was too soft, too distant, like it was being spoken from the bottom of a well. Evangeline hesitated. Her memories of the night were hazy, warped, but she remembered the reflection, the voice, the cold touch of her own skin from the inside. I opened it, she whispered. That was all it took. The candles along the altar flickered violently. The stained glass trembled in their frames, and behind the altar, the wall began to bleed. Thick lines of dark crimson carved down the stone, not dripping, but writing forming a single symbol, the circle and the line, the mark of Magdalene. That night, the prayers changed. Gone were the traditional hymns and Latin chants. Instead, the sisters hummed a single dissonant note in the dark. No one led, no one followed. They simply joined in, drawn into its resonance. The air seemed to vibrate with something primal, something that didn't ask for devotion. It demanded. It. Sister Maria stood in the corner the entire night, holding a broken rosary and whispering numbers that never repeated dot by the third night. The crypt door was open dot. No one had touched it. No key had been used. It simply stood ajar, the same way it had been the last time Magdalene vanished. The scent of salt water filled the halls again. A trail of white feathers led from the chapel to the crypt stairs, some of them still twitching as if they'd only just fallen. Sister Ruth began writing in her sleep. Her pages were soaked in black wax, her hands blistered with burns she did not remember getting. And Evangeline? She no longer needed to sleep. She sat before the chapel bells began ringing without ropes. Every night, exactly at 3:17 a.m., the sound echoed through the stone corridors, not like metal on metal, but like bones clashing underwater. The toll wasn't just heard. It was felt in the chest, in the teeth, in the spaces behind the eyes. The sisters stopped reacting after the third night. By then, it was part of the ritual, part of the rhythm of the house. The bells marked the moment when Magdalene would arrive. Sister Evangeline had begun to record everything. Not with ink, those pages always burned or vanished, but by carving words into the stone beneath her bed. The words came from nowhere, etched into her mind during moments of silence. She didn't question them anymore. They came through her. Through Magdalene. One morning, she found a phrase she didn't remember carving. When the mirror forgets, the body remembers. That day, Sister Maria vanished. Her bed was still made, her slippers tucked under the frame, but her rosary was looped around the doorknob of the east hallway tight, as if someone had yanked it from her hands mid-prayer. The sisters didn't speak of it, but they knew. The order had changed. The silence had grown teeth. The Mother Superior tried to intervene. She called for the Archbishop, demanding exorcists, demanding answers. But the letter never arrived. The messenger returned a day later, disoriented, barefoot, and with salt crusted in his hair. He could not speak, could not look at the convent without weeping. He was placed in a sanatorium in the valley. He hasn't spoken a word since. On the fourth night, the crypt opened wider. Candles lit themselves. The basin in the infirmary filled with black water that boiled despite the cold. The paintings on the wall cried, not with oil, but with ink thee. Same symbols Evangeline had carved in her sleep. She now walked with her eyes open and her pupils gone. And still, the other sisters followed her. It was not possession, it was inheritance. Magdalene did not take them. She taught them. Each sister remembered something different. A moment from another life. A death they never died. A voice they heard. In the womb. She was stitching them together, one memory at a time, turning faith into flesh, devotion into obedience. And the mirror no longer reflected the present. It showed the future. The future the mirror showed was always the same. A chapel with no ceiling, where stars bled instead of shone. 13 figures in crimson veils, standing in a circle around a pulsing altar made of ribs and candle wax. And at the center, Magdalene, no longer a sister, no longer even human. Her eyes were two mirrors. Her breath sounded like weeping. Her arms spread wide in welcome, as if she had always been waiting for this moment. Sister Evangeline began sleepwalking toward the crypt every night. She would stand at the mouth of the stairs until the candles flared and whispered her name. Sometimes she wept. Sometimes she smiled. Once she laughed, but it wasn't her laugh. It echoed too long, too deep, the kind of sound that doesn't leave your bones for days. The remaining sisters prepared. They cleaned the crypt, though it never stayed clean. They sang with mouths stitched shut. One carved a hollow into her own palm to carry Magdalene's promise. Another painted her veil, black with ash. No one questioned anything. The convent had become something else, a waiting room between the sacred and the profane. One night, the Virgin Mary statue in the courtyard turned dotted, now faced the east hallway, her weeping eyes fixed on the sealed door. Her feet bled into the stone, forming a path of red lil that bloomed and withered within minutes. The message was clear. Even the saints had turned their backs. Even heaven had forgotten this place. Then Sister Helena died, or tried to dot. She was found in the crypt, crucified upside down with no visible wounds, smiling. Her heartbeat was absent. Her breath stopped, but she spoke. In Magdalene's voice, repeating the names of all the sisters, not the living ones, the lost ones, the ones buried without prayer, the ones who opened the door first. That's when the chapel bells rang 13 times dot, and the earth began to hum beneath their feet. The humming didn't stop dot. It grew stronger each night, rising from the earth like breath from a sleeping beast. The stone tiles in the chapel trembled. Dust floated without falling. The crucifix above the altar began to bend slowly, methodically, until it turned upside down. None of the sisters reacted. They simply adjusted their prayers, changed the direction of their kneeling. They knew the rituals were no longer for God. Sister Evangeline led the procession into the crypt, her eyes still blank, her hands soaked in ink that never dried. Behind her, 12 sisters followed in silence, 13 altogether, as it was written, as it was always meant to be. Each carried a candle that would not go out. Each wore a veil they had never owned. The crypt had changed dot. It no longer resembled stone and mortar. The walls pulsed faintly, as if alive. Roots protruded from the ceiling, forming grotesque vines that glowed faintly red. A pulpit stood at the center, made of what looked like bone and wax. The air was thick with incense and blood. Atop the pulpit sat the book, the one Magdalene had first opened. Its pages were blank now. It didn't need words anymore. They were the scripture. One by one, the sisters approached and placed a drop of blood upon the cover. Not from cuts, from their tongues. They bit down willingly, smiling through the pain. And as the blood touched the page, the book began to write itself. Not in ink. In veins. Sister Helena, still dead, still breathing, stood at the entrance and whispered the same phrase over and over. She is coming. She is always coming. She never left. Her smile widened with each repetition, her teeth growing longer, her breath colder. The chapel bells rang again 13 times. But this time, they came from beneath the mirror, shattered not from impact, but from rejection. It no longer needed to show what would be. It had already begun. The chapel's walls darkened as if stained by something moving inside them. The Virgin Mary statue finally fell, crumbling into salt. The east hallway door melted. The circle and line symbol began to appear everywhere, on skin, on walls, on the inside of closed eyelids. And then Sister Maria returned, but no one remembers when the convent disappeared. The building still stands, some say, but it's different now. No birds fly above it. No shadows fall across its walls. The wind avoids it. Maps forget it. And yet, on certain nights, the bells ring. Always 13 times. Always at 3:17 a.m. And those who hear them find their dreams stained with salt and scripture they've never read. They say Sister Evangeline never returned, but her voice lingers. In mirrors. In prayers. In rooms where silence should live. If you ever walk past a chapel and smell the ocean run, if your rosary burns your skin hide, and if your reflection smiles before you do, kneel. This has been another tale from Convent Nightmares. If you still have your breath, leave a like to remind yourself you're alive. Subscribe for more stories that should never be remembered. And comment below with your city and country so she knows where to start looking next. Some doors were never meant to open, but once they do, they don't close behind you. They follow.